There was an article that was sent to me by a friend of mine that a woman had written about the metaverse and her fears around the metaverse as a Black woman of being excluded.
To me, the metaverse and the larger space is global. A lot of people are seeing your content, want to feel represented, and want to make sure that they're feeling like, yes, the brand's talking to me and I'm included in that conversation.
The metaverse, I think, is an opportunity for us as humans to yet again redeem ourselves, right? And provide an ecosystem that I think is free of racism, racial prejudice, bullying, and other harmful behaviors.
The 2021 report by the Institute of Digital Fashion highlighted the existing problem of underrepresentation in gaming experiences and consumers' desire for more diverse options in spaces. The survey research revealed that for 70% of respondents, gender representation within virtual worlds was vital. Moreover, 60% raised concerns about the increased potential for bullying and discrimination against disabled people within virtual experiences. We asked the experts how digital agencies and brands can ensure that representation is included in metaverse guidelines from the beginning.
And if you research inclusivity, just Google search metaverse and inclusivity. There's some conversations happening. There's more awareness, I think, than it was even when I started dealing with this 3 months ago. There's more awareness, at least conversation around it. But it's going to have to be a conversation. That's the thing. People are going to have to say, we want to have a conversation in our boardrooms, in our internal meetings, in our design blueprints, when we start to think about how we're going to show up, that inclusivity, integration, equity is at the forefront of our conversation. We can't build everything, start it, and then people go, oh, I'm left out. That can't be. That's what's happening now.
Right now, as we're in this very, very crucial time frame, so to speak, as we're building the foundations of the metaverse, I think it's not just the brands, but truly also the creators, the builders who are creating those platforms that we're talking about today, and the technology, and then ultimately enable those brands to enter the space to think about that. But then also on the brand side, just the same as on the agency side, to think about who's actually working on those campaigns, who's thinking about the products that we're trying to get into those spaces, or the brand messaging, or the creative that we're using, or how are we showing up, and why does it matter? And it matters just as much as it does today, or it did yesterday and tomorrow and a decade from now, right? Representation across the board matters, and it's everyone's responsibility.
We know that there's a digital divide, that we have the number of, right now in the United States, I think there are a total of 47 million people that are offline in the United States. 18 million have access to internet, but they can't afford it. And as we know, when you go into the metaverse, when you go into gaming, you need fast internet, right? It can't be slow, it can't be high speed. So that has to be thought about. So as you develop the metaverse and you got a digital divide, you got to have some balance there. Real-time information or experiences, let me say that, have to be dealt with as you develop that.
And how does the representation in the metaverse differ from the way brands act in real life and online currently?
Whether acting on social media or in the real world every single day should be exactly the same with showing up online.
You can't be one thing in real life and another thing in the metaverse necessarily as a brand, right? Consumers are not forgiving. They're going to be quick to kind of sniff out the brands that are not being very genuine.
However, online is always, we've seen that with social media, online is always an opportunity for people to hide behind anonymous statuses, right? Like, even if you're using an avatar, it doesn't always mean that we know who you are. So that typically enables trolls, it enables people to speak their mind and sometimes not paying attention to who they're talking to or the way they're talking. So there's lots of opportunity for great impact, but also for people to misuse that. So there's an opportunity for brands to say, hey, can we either go on the platforms, enable regulation around that, work with the creators to make sure that we're building the right community, right? That those instances don't even show up or are decreasing, or that there's some sort of regulation around how that is being dealt with and how fast we can deal with that. A much bigger push needs to happen from brands to think through, okay, where are they showing up in the online world, and how much responsibility do they need to take in order to facilitate a healthy environment for everyone?
How can diversity within brand and agency teams contribute to inclusive metaverse experiences?
Part of the practice and the 10 principles underneath the design justice is bringing the voices of those who are marginalized to the table. You design for them and not for yourself. Okay. So that is sometimes in the design world, particularly in technology and education, I will say, there's a tendency to design based on what we think people need. At the end of the day, you're going to have to seek out, which may take time, but you got to be willing to do that. It has to be a diligence to be able to seek out diverse voices at the table.
We have to do a better job in the agency world of not just recruiting diverse talent, but also elevating people to leadership positions, because this is what happens quite a lot. You'll have folks that are diverse, that are doing the work, but then when it gets to the stakeholders, there's a huge disconnect. And I've seen it many times. You'll have work that's very representative, that's very diverse. And then when it gets to the stakeholders are not diverse and they change a lot of the messaging.
You're going to have to seek out people who are typically not in the development or even this is STEM space to make sure that you create a team that you look at and you see culturally, voice-wise, education-wise, just how people have grown up and they think brings that to the table itself. And that's the best way to be able to really create good design.
And how do you define good design?
Yeah, good design is, it really addresses the needs of the audience, the end user. You don't create in a silos with good design. You really set out to look at the problem. You map, empathy mapping, because empathy mapping requires the morals, the values, the thoughts, the feelings. It'll ask me, what do I want? And then you design based on that. You don't design based on just looking out and seeing or thinking that there's just a gap and I'm just going to fill the gap. That is the difference.
And how do you advise your clients and teams on creative including metaverse experience?
Don't just recreate experiences from the real world in the metaverse. Use the metaverse as an opportunity to create something net new and create something exciting. Use the metaverse as an opportunity to enhance something that's existing.
If you're reaching a much larger audience, you want to make sure that there is a representation for everyone and that you can actually address that either through the language that you're using, whatever you're enabling them to do, the features that you're enabling, how you're truly talking to them in the creative that you're using, or the things that you're offering, right? That actually make sure, okay, people feel safe and this is makes sense for everyone to be there and it actually works.
Don't be afraid to fail, but fail fast, iterate and learn. A lot of times you're not going to get it right the first time, especially because the metaverse is so nascent. Things change all the time. There are new platforms that come around in terms of the metaverse. There's not a lot of governance yet. The rules are still being written. So it's a little bit like building the airplane and flying it at the same time.
Can you please tell me more about the guidelines that you follow?
Yeah, the design justice. But we saw the Black Lives Matter movement really pivot beyond domestically, meaning the United States, but be an international conversation. And so they looked at it from, here's this social justice platform that if designers were involved in this platform, how much more change could we receive? Because we know that activism is extremely important. There's a level of activism that could occur in a design space. And they brought that together. They then created these 10 principles that allow you to really look from the inside, and meaning looking from the side of the communities that you serve. And design justice is straight focused on marginalized communities. They're focused on people of color who've been left out of the conversation. And how do we build so that they are these ethical design.
What factors should brands consider when creating avatars and otherwise representing themselves in the metaverse?
Have a sense of cultural relevance of what could come across as offensive to people. If you're creating a character that's based on Asian culture, you might want to have people from that demographic weigh in on that. Don't just do it and put it out there. You want to pressure test that against that community to make sure that there's not cultural misappropriation happening or you coming across as insensitive or playing into old stereotypes.
For every brand manager, I say go to the platform yourself, create an avatar and figure it out, see if you like it or not and what may or may not be working. If you go to a platform, the first thing you probably have to do is to create a profile of some sort, an avatar of some sort, and then you will already see like what are the options, right? Is it female, male only, or do I have an option for non-binary or anything else in between? So it already starts there. So understanding what the platform offers and how diverse, for example, or inclusive that platform is matters.
Another case in point. So Winnie Harlow, for instance, right? Winnie Harlow has a skin condition. There are no metaverse platforms today that allows you to create an avatar with vitiligo. So if you're a beauty brand, for instance, if you're partnering with like a Winnie Harlow and you have a metaverse strategy happening, you might want to connect the dots and make sure that whatever platform you're connecting with, so if it's Roblox, for instance, it makes a lot of sense for you to go to Roblox and say, hey, we know that you don't do this today, but we would like to partner with you to make an extension of your avatar system so that people could actually create avatars with a skin condition, for instance.
How can brands create metaverse experiences that are accessible to the disability community?
The first thing I think with people with disabilities is understanding lived experiences. So I think this goes back to not only design justice, but design thinking. And that methodology, you, again, go to the person that you're designing for and you spend a lot of time with them, living in their space. They need to tell you what about their day may be something that inhibits them, or what about their day allows them to move more freely. So you don't take away something through assumption, but then you add something through understanding.
When there's audio involved, we have to be very conscious of making sure that the audio is accessible. We have to make sure that color contrast we're taking accessibility and vision impairedness into that. If you're someone that has restricted movement, how will that work in the metaverse? If your avatar, if you move your joystick or your Quest joysticks or your mouse, you move it just a little bit and the character goes this way really fast. That's also not very representative. Gestures, right? Sign language, etc.
Meta is also doing a raised view for people who are disabled to allow them to be able, again, if you're sitting in a wheelchair, you can't stand. You are actually a quadriplegic, having from waist down or the ability to not do that, or you're on a cane and you walk and you can't stand all the time. How do we accommodate you again and not leave you out of the space?
How can brands ensure they have representative influencer strategies and payment models in the metaverse?
The interesting part, or the interesting path that we're following around blockchain, is that we can actually track who gets paid or not and what they're getting paid. So if a brand is ready to move down that path of like, yes, let's move to cryptocurrency, for example, that would be a wonderful opportunity to actually be very open and public about where is their supply chain headed, right? Like, where items coming from, who's getting paid for it, and what are they getting paid. So there is a new interesting visibility that's popping up and public debate around that. I don't think we've quite figured that out yet, because obviously not every brand and every country is on board with that yet, but that's going to be for sure an interesting path forward.
For brands, this may be a way actually to be able to say we're going to change the landscape, look at my brand landscape and go into this metaverse space and use influencers as a way who are about just and justice, who are about equity, to use them to influence and bring in more opportunities for people who have been marginalized. Influencers could be a big part of that because they could be a great partner to be able to help a brand be more successful as they move into a place of being more equitable.